Okay. Okay, so we're going to start very calmly, patiently do the Shulchan Aruch together. And maybe we'll find some interesting insights. So turn to Samech Bet in the Shulchan Aruch. Wait, who would like to read that didn't read? Here, Josh, maybe you want to read the first Seif.
Okay, let's try. צריך לברך ברכת חתנים בבית החתן קודם נישואין, והן 6 ברכות, ואם יש שם יין, מביא כוס יין, ומברך על היין תחילה ומסדר את כולם על הכוס, ונמצא מברך 7 ברכות, ואם אין יין מצוי, מברך על השיכר.
Very good. So who is he like? Who is he possibly like?
Like the Rambam.
Like the Rambam, right? Like the Rambam because he's saying, well, what's the key word? Kodem. It's pretty much the exact word, same word from the Rambam. You also use the word kodem. Kodem nisuin. Rambam does say that word, kodem. And he also says another halach of the Rambam, which is that you need wine, but if you don't have it, you can use sheikhar. I mean, I think actually the Rambam says you don't even have to have that. What if you don't have anything?
The pshat is he's like the Rambam that he says that you don't actually need even sheikhar. Im yesham kos, im yesham sheikhar.
Right.
The Ran says you actually need. It's obligatory to have a kos. It's a bracha ala kos.
Who says that?
The Ran, bepashtis.
Right. So the Rambam says you don't need it, and he's passing like the Rambam. You don't need it, but if you have it, right? Ve'im, thank you. Ve'im ein yain. Well, mivarech al sheikhar. Well, we don't know though. What if he didn't say im ein shama sheikhar? He didn't say. But you're right from the first one.
It sounds like he's saying you do mivarech. You do have to do a bracha on a kos. It sounds like he's saying, preferably on yain, but avanim ein yain as sheikhar.
Right.
Which is kind of funny because he's saying yesh 6 brachot, but then if you have a kos, you do a 7 brachot, but then no matter what, you're supposed to have the kos. So why did he bother saying you do 6 brachot? He's just saying you do 7 brachot.
Exactly. So from that, all those inferences, we can conclude that really you could say it without anything. From all those.
How do you read that from the Shulchan Aruch?
That's what the Bach says about the Rambam.
Right. Well, I think, and I think it's what the Rambam. I think you can learn it in the Shulchan Aruch too. No, because he's quoting the I believe that when he quotes the Rambam, he's basking like the Rambam.
I believe that if really you were able to get married without anything, you would have mentioned it, right? Because he seems to be saying like if you can't find wine, so then you have to do it on something else. But it doesn't talk about a scenario where you don't have anything.
A good question. I think though, if I had to choose a side, I would choose the side that you don't need anything.
I'm with Reuben, just to say. Just to say because it's unusual. I'm with Reuben.
But even the nisuach of sheikhar is the nosach of the Rambam. The Rambam says that you can marry with anything. Like that's the whole point that the Rambam really mitakesh that they're not actually sheva brachot. They're only 6. He's really like onto it.
Look at the Chelkat Mecholkek Aleph here. So Reuven, I like always to challenge you. So here, Reuven, read that one.
All right, מברך על שכר, ואם אין שכר מצוי יברך בלא כוס. כך משמע מדברי הרמב"ם פרק י'.
So he's saying, and why does he bring the Rambam? Why is it relevant? Because he's holding
the language is very similar.
The language is similar. He's assuming that we're passing like the Rambam. And he's adding in that clarification. If you don't have anything, you can also do it without a kos. I mean, it's a big kiddush. I agree with you. It's a big kiddush. Whoever saw a wedding like that, but you could do that. If a person is,
or if you carry on Chelkat Machokek, then he asks that question. He says, "How can it be?"
Okay, so wait. So say it again. But continue. Carry on.
Reuben, you go.
Reuven. No, Reuven, keep going.
וכתב
המגיד. המגיד משנה.
וכתב המגיד משנה שפשוט הוא שאין כוס מעכב. So he says that it's pashut that you don't need a kos. אבל הראש והטור כתבו בשם רבנו ניסים, דלא סגה ולא כוס. ולא ידעתי טעמו, דעה בגמרא בכתובות, בחדם
Wait. So wait a second. Go slower. I like to go slower. אבל הראש
So basically
והטור
he's saying
כתב.
that the Rosh and the Torah saying כתבו בשם רבנו ניסים, דלא סגה ולא כוס, that you can't do it without a kos.
You must have a cup. The lo sagi
Exactly.
below kos. You must have a cup. V'lo yadati taimo, but I don't agree with them. In other words, I don't understand his opinion that you have to have a cup. Of course, you don't have to. Dover pashut that you don't need a cup. You don't need it. Duha, and we can now continue.
דעה בגמרא בכתובות, בחדה מחתה, מרתינו לברכת אירוסין וברכת נישואים, ולא הזכיר כוס בשום אחד מהם. Whereas he's basically bringing the Gemara. He says that in a lot of cases, like you never like.
What case is that?
Then,
Bechada, I think it's Bechada Machta, one wedding, or one Chatan. Machtin hu lebracha Irusin, Birkat Nisuin. They did both of
ולא
them.
הזכיר כוס.
V'lo ezkir kos b'shum echad mehem. In neither case did he mention that anything about a cup.
Well,
So
maybe
the
it's
Gemara
because it's that
seems to
obvious
say
that
you don't
you
need
need
a
a
cup.
kos.
And it's master from Lashon Rambam, Misadran. We say it on a cup. The cup is not akif.
I find it kind of like it's kind of dismissing the opinion of the Tur and the Rush, right? He's saying like, well, what are like I don't know. It's like his explanation is not satisfactory to me.
Well, the Tur said it in the name of Rabbeinu Nissim, so he wasn't necessarily agreeing with it, but he's saying that he's agreeing with the Shulchan Aruch. He's not arguing on Shulchan Aruch, and he understands the Shulchan Aruch to mean you don't need a cup. If you, I mean, obviously you should have a cup, but you don't need a cup, and he's even arguing on those who would suggest that you would need a cup. He doesn't even
Rabbi,
understand.
Even the language of Mesader, it like that's the deep difference between like the two first blessing of Avdallah and the last blessing. The last blessing is a blessing on the cup. Like you can't do a Mavdil ben Kodesh Lechol without a cup. Kos gorem lebracha shetavo, yain gorem lebracha shetavo. The famous Divrei Betilah in Mishnah. When the Gemara uses the language of Mesader, it's like like Rabbi Landy said before. It's an organ. It's an editorial thing almost. Like you're doing it around a cup. That's
right. So the cup is in a sense not an integral part of the event, and therefore the birkat, the bracha that the first person says, Brei Priya Gafen, he should really. I mean, it comes out that he should really spill a little bit of it on his hand, so that he himself can taste some of the wine because he said a bracha, and the bracha was in a sense not essential. It was required. And it's a borderline thing. I don't know what word to use. It's preferable to have. It's necessary to. It's really necessary to have, but it's not an integral part of the event, and therefore maybe he should really put a little wine on his hand and drink and touch and taste it, so that he can say the bracha of Brei Priya Gafen without any chashash.
According to Rashi, he doesn't need to.
Why?
Apparently, it says, I think this is in Barachot, it says, "Bekame mekomot hu ba u'mevarech alav af al pi shelo hayu sulchim l'shtiato."
Where are you reading? I'm sorry.
This is from Barachot. I'm reading on one of the Pirushim on the Rambam here, and he brings an explanation of Rashi's of how Rashi deals with it, saying you wouldn't need to actually drink the wine for this particular bracha. But I agree, it's odd. Like, why would you make a bracha and then
right? If you remember, several weeks ago, I brought up Pnei Yehoshua, which talked about it. He also asked this question. So fine. Maybe you don't have to. Obviously, most people don't do this spilling, at least here. But maybe you could. Question?
So just to make sure I understand, it's saying that lechatchila you need it, but if you don't have it, it's fine.
What do you say? Need what? Need the cup?
Yeah.
Well.
Or he's not even saying lechatchila. I said like whatever. If you have a cup, good. If not,
no. I would even say lechatchila. I would even say you must have a cup. But if there isn't, if you cannot get, we talk about like how much tircha, the post you talk about, like what if you know how much tircha, like also we talk about with 10 men, you must have 10 men, but what if you cannot get them?
Right.
How far do you
No,
have to go?
yeah.
So
You,
I wouldn't
right,
say
you
it's-
have Achronim would say, okay, Achronim would say, what? And you're not going to have a marriage? And other Achronim said, yeah, you won't have a marriage. What's that argument going on? The argument going on here is that they're creating a ritual.
right. No, I wouldn't say to be I wouldn't say you should be like lackadaisical. You should say, you know,
No, but I mean,
you need
it's
your wine.
difficult.
No, I'm
It's
not arguing with you.
difficult.
I'm just answering Reuven. You for sure need the wine. You for sure need to get the wine. But if
Yeah.
it's impossible to get it, you're not going to call off the wedding. You're not going to say, well, we can't say the brachot because we don't have the wine. If you cannot get wine for whatever reason, and you cannot get any sheikhar, so you can still go ahead with the wedding, but you should get them, obviously.
So the question really is whether marriage can be enacted with only shesh brachot as opposed to sheva brachot.
And it
right?
can be.
It's
It can be.
always Sheish Brachot. We only call it Sheva Brachos because of Rabbi Agafen. By the way, I'm still on medication, so that's why I'm so angry today.
Here,
Cheryl
so
says I'm terrible when I take the steroids. Okay. No, actually, she says I'm more terrible when I take the steroids.
So look at we're going to come back to Aleph in the Beit Shmuel, but let's look at Bet in Beit Shmuel first.
Aaron has
Wait,
some.
oh, Aaron has a question. Sorry. Aaron, you have a question? Your hand looks like it's up, but maybe it's your picture froze.
Frozen.
I think your picture froze. Okay. So we'll go on. All right, so let's Josh, can you read Bet in the Beit Shmuel?
Sure. Mevikos. Barosh ita delo sage belokos. That's a discussion. The Rosh says you can't not have a kos. Ubarambam mashma de sage belokos. Rambam seems to say that it could work without a kos. מה שכתב בחלקת מחוקק בשם המגיד דאין הכוס מעכב, לא דמה?
Well, Doc, he's incorrect. He's incorrect. He's saying he is incorrect in his understanding of the Maggid Mishnah. He quoted the Maggid Mishnah as saying that that the kos is not required, but he's not correct about the Maggid Mishnah. I want to look at. Yeah, go ahead.
כי המגיד לא כתב זאת בברכת חתנים, אלא בברכת אירוסין. ושם לכולי עלמא כוס אין מעכב. כמו שכתב בראש.
So he says, the Maggid was only talking about Erusin. He wasn't talking about what we're talking about, which is the brachas of the Nisuin. And because over by Erusin, the Kulei Alma, everybody agrees that the kos is not required.
Okay.
In other words, that's where he was talking about. But here, the Maggid never said that. Go ahead.
והד מעכב יותר בברכת חכמים משום דגמרינן.
בברכת חתנים, right?
בברכת חתנים משום דגמרינן 7 ברכות דווקא. Not like Rav Landis.
He says, because we have this, we know, everybody knows, because who hasn't been in this year, everybody knows that it's Sheva Brachot. And so of course we need all 7.
ומקדימין ברכת בורא פרי הגפן, ואחר כך 6 ברכות. וכשמברכים ברכת המזון, מברכים 6 ברכות, ואחר כך בורא פרי הגפן. ולא כרבי.
Rav Yah.
I don't have a hey. Okay.
Rav Yah, yeah.
וכך
וכן כתוב בדרכי משה.
וכן כתוב בדרכי משה, ובתשובה...
I don't know who that, I don't know who Mem Ayin is. I didn't check. In some Tshuvot, Siman Mem, Posek Rav Yah. Okay, this is not important. Wait, but just read it, continue on.
וכן בתוספות פרק ערבי פסחים, דף ק"ב.
ולמנהגים. ולמנהג שלנו.
מנהג שלנו יש לומר הטעם שעל יין נראית מברכים בורא פרי הגפן לצורך ברכת המזון, ולא משום 7 ברכות. לכן מאחרים בורא פרי הגפן.
So in other words, the Rav Yas says to say Brei Pri Hagafen first, which is great news, because if you're ever at a Sheva Brachas and they say Brei Pri Hagafen first at the benching, you don't have to say, oh my God, what are we gonna do? We have to say it the other way. Now we have to say it. Do we say it again at the end? You know, who knows what to do? So no, if you say it first, if you say it like that under a chuppah, the same way, so you've got on whom to rely.
Yeah.
But why do we not do it that way? And he says, because if you would do it that way, what's wrong with doing it that way? First saying Brei Pri Hagafen, it looks like it's the normal Brei Pri Hagafen that everybody does at the end of benching. Normally, on any time when you have a minyan, you hold a kos. You're supposed to. Many people bless on a kos. They hold a cup on a Shabbos, and they say Brei Pri Hagafen. So it'll look like that Brei Pri Hagafen, and then it'll look like the Sheva brachos don't have a kos for them. So since to make it clear that the kos is for the Sheva brachos, we do it at the end. Yeah. Question? So wait a second. Now we have this low dak. So we have a machloket basically in what the Maggid says. Whenever I see such a thing, whenever I see that the Beit Shmuel says that the machloket can understand the Maggid, the first thing I do is open up the Maggid and see, well, who's right? Because I'm not going to just take it at their word. Each other. Somebody, So let's open up the Maggid again. And it's where we saw with Reb Landis, it's chapter 10 in Hilchos Ishus. And let's decide who's right. I mean, far be it from us to decide who's right, but let's do it anyway. I mean, yeah. With all humility aside, let's see what he says. So it's on Dalet. It's the Maggid on Dalet.
I lost you for a second. What are you looking at?
I'm in the Rambam, Hilchos Ishus, Perek Yud. And I need the Maggid on Halacha Dalet. We have to first look at Halacha Dalet. So, what is he talking about in Halacha Dalet? Which, is he talking about Erusin or Nisuin?
It looks like Birkat Chatanim.
It looks
To me, I mean, in La'aniut Da'ati, it looks like he's talking about, well, we just learned it with Rabbi Landis. It's for sure talking about Nisuin. And on that, the Maggid says, Dalid, V'im Yesham Yayin, Perush, She'ena Yayin Ma'akev, V'davar Pashut. So, it seems to me that Chacham HaChokek is right. And not like, and when the Beit Shmuel says, Lo Dak, he wasn't correct. Well, he wasn't correct. No? Anybody?
Yeah, you're right. No, this is, but why is it Pashut?
Oh, more basic question. Yeah, right. Why is it Pashut? Why is it Pashut?
Sorry, he said she'ena yain me'akev. He said no, the yain specifically, not the class. Sorry, if you want to be medakdek on the Maggid Mishneh.
I wouldn't go like that. We're talking. The question is really just to. No, but look at Dal. Im hayasham yayin mevi kos shel yayin umevarech al hayayin techilo misader kol, because of the language, because it says, because the Ram says im. If there was, he never mentioned it. He didn't start off. He should have started the halacha by saying, how do you do the bracha? First thing you do is you get a cup of wine, or sheikhar, or chamer medina, and then you say these brachas. But he didn't say that. He taught us that there is halachas, and then as an afterthought, he says, the im hayasham yayin, then you bring it. So it's davar pashut from the language of the Rambam that the kos is not makif.
And in terms of the machloket between the Chacham HaChokek and the Beit Shmuel, the point is that we're not talking about kiddushin here at all. Like, I don't know where that's even right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I
but
don't know.
Yavni, I think that's exactly the point of the Beit Shmuel. The Beit Shmuel imagines the Rambam's Chatuna as our Chatuna. The Kiddushin and Nisuin happen together. That's the only way I can understand the Beit Shmuel.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, but that's where he's going. I mean, in other places he says like that too. Listen, Yayin is here only as an organizing principle.
Right.
I mean,
So let me summarize.
with making kiddush, there's a whole bunch of asmachtas and drushes that they bring that you need wine. But so since wine is the wine, I think you would say it's partial because it's so. You're right about in terms of how the Rambam speaks. Nachum was right, but I'm saying also in terms of the thing itself, wine is not ikar.
It's just a way to get the party started, basically.
Yeah, but you need to say that like when we go to Shechar, it's like simply like saying this is Shivat Yemei Mishte. You do need to have like in your mind, like you don't have here a birkat like you have kiddush. You can do kiddush a la pat. You don't have sheva brachot a la pat. You have sheva brachot on la kosa Shechar because you're Shivat Yemei Mishte. You need the simcha here.
Yeah, that's what it is, like a way to get the party started, like a way to just like mark the occasion almost.
By the way, the Rambam doesn't mention Sheikhar. I didn't see it here. Am I right? He just says if you have wine, then do it on your wine. He never says Sheikhar.
Yeah, because here the Shulchan Aruch is combining the Ran with the Rambam. Like he's saying,
right,
we do need Sheikhar, we do need a kos at least Sheikhar, but like he's like taking the stance of the Ran. The Ran permits it to be a Sheikharik, but like then he says, but then he goes according to the Rambam.
Well,
you don't need actually.
I wouldn't go quite that far. I would say he's adding in an addition to the Rambam. I don't think he's actually holding that the kos is ma'akev. I still don't think that.
No, of course no. Like, but he's doing a kula on the Rambam. He passing like
yes,
the Rambam.
Exactly. He's doing a kula on the Rambam. Exactly. He's adding in one more kula that
okay. You guys got it, nailed it. Go further.
Yes. So let me just summarize 2 points that I wanted to get from that second Beit Shmuel. One is that we really the Beit Shmuel, I disagreeing with the Beit Shmuel, and I'm going with the Chelkat Machokek that the kos is not ma'akev, and that's the halacha. And the second thing is just a nice thing to know why we say the brachot in the yayin at the end of Birkat Hamazon and not at the beginning of the Sheva Brachos at the end of Birkat Hamazon, because we want to distinguish it from the normal cup of wine that you would have at the end of a meal. So that's just important. Now let's go to, we skipped the Beit Shmuel, and he's going to go back to another discussion that we talked about with Rev Landis today, but I want to see how he puts it. So here, Sarah, since you're awake and bright and early, maybe you want to read this.
Maybe I'm awake. We'll see how I do.
Maybe. Now you'll become awake.
Sure. Aleph.
Yeah.
Okay. Kodem Nisuin.
So wait, what are we talking about? Kodem Nisuin. That this is a big topic that we were talking about with Rev Lance before you were here, which was that you should say the bracha of before. We saw that a Rashi says kusha nichnas, like as you enter, and then we saw that the Rambam says it should be kodem, before, and the Ran said no, it could even be after. And we saw that the linchpin of the argument is whether the mitzvah, whether it's a birka, a bracha on a mitzvah, and therefore it should be over l'siyatan. That's the background. So go ahead.
כך כתב הרמב"ם, ולשיטתו שפיר, משום דסביר לחופה, היינו ייחוד, ואסור להתייחד ולא ברכות. So the Rambam says this because, and it sort of like makes sense with his shita, because he thinks that chuppah is not yichud, and it would be asur to have yichud with velo brachot.
So wait a second. So it's not because of over l'asiyatan, it's because asur li'yached velo bracha. It's not because, in other words, that's like we saw that the Beit Yosef brought that in the it's a totally different reason. It's not because of over l'siyatan. The Rambam holds that because yichud is the is the thing. Is the essence of chuppah. You can't be in yichud without the brachot. You're not allowed to be in yichud, so you have to do it before. Otherwise, the yichud that you're having is an illegitimate yichud. Not because of not because of mitzvah, but because of just a technicality.
I
Right,
found
because she's basically kala v'lo bracha, and then like that's
exactly.
like
She's kala v'lo bracha.
I found that sort of an odd
If
argument, because if you're debating do you do it before the chuppah or under the chuppah, clearly by chuppah we're not talking about the yichud room, because you're not right, because they're not doing it alone. They didn't begin for them. So if that's the question, then the chuppah must be a public thing, in which case why are you saying you need to have it before the chuppah?
I said
no. But I think the idea is that the question is that, like, if we read the Rambam on his own terms, then the Rambam thinks that chuppah is yichud, and that's why he says that you need to say the brachos first. But so the question, as we formulated, of like, do you say the brachot like before you go into the like little canopy thing or after, is not the question that the Rambam has.
Exactly, the canopy is meaningless according to the Rambam. It has no meaning. And as long as you're going to go to yichud after the canopy, then then under the canopy you could say the bracha. It's because before the yichud.
Right, and that is saying the bracha like kodem hachuppah.
But then there's a nafkamina. There's a big nafkamina. There's a big nafkamina, I think, which is since it's nothing to do. It's a huge nafkamina. Since it's nothing to do with over la'asiyatan. When we do over la'asiyatan, you generally want to do the mitzvah immediately after. And there's this whole thing like there's a halacha like on a talis. You're not supposed to say your bracha on your talis when it's folded. You're supposed to have it open and ready so that you say the bracha and then immediately put it on. You want to be over l'siyatan doesn't just mean before, it means immediately before. But if we're saying it's like the Beit Shmuel is saying, that according to the Rambam, it's not because of that reason, it's because of just a technicality that you need to have the bracha before you can go to yichud, then it could be an hour before. And then if you want to hold that the yichud is going to be later in the evening, no problem. You don't have any hefsek because there's no Indian of hefsek as long as you did it before.
No, but the whole idea is that the yichud is taking place right after. Like you truly said, like
a lot of the opinions, right?
Like the Beis HaChatan.
Right, one by one.
Sorry, Lexi, go for it. Oh.
We don't hear you. Lexi, we don't hear you.
I was just gonna say that this is like similar to what we've seen in like the way that most of the post. Can you hear me at all? No.
You hear a little bit, most of the post-scheme, and then we didn't hear.
Can you hear me? Is it like a connection thing or is it like a microphone thing?
Well, now we hear you.
Okay, great. I'm just gonna say that like the way we talk that like the Ran and the Rosh and them talk about the bracha, they're like, this isn't even a bracha, like it's not a bracha on a mitzvah, like, right? It's like birchat shevach and things like that we say if the mitzvah isn't even like, it's not really nisuvin, it's like pru. So like pshita that you're not doing it like like immediately before. And that's also why we talk about like, I forget who says this, but talk about why the Rambam says, yeah, like if you end up not doing the bracha, you can do it later because the bracha, it's like, it's not on a mitzvah, and it's also on kind of like the existence of the marriage, which is this ongoing thing. Like so long as you're married, that's the thing the bracha is on. So it's not like one specific, like discrete moment that is kind of
exactly. No, 100%, exactly right. In other words, you might have thought that the Rambam was saying it's over l'siyatan, and the Beit Shmuel is pointing out, no, it's not over l'siyatan. It's because it's not a birkas mitzvah. It's a birkas shevach. So but it does have to be before, because it is in a sense a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. It's a bracha that is permitting you to now have yichud.
But
I read sorry.
Go, Reuven.
Oh, thank you so much. I was reading your Torah in the Rambam as over last Yatan because it's taking place b'beis hachatan kodam nisuim, right? It's taking place at the place where the yichud is supposed to happen. So in my mind, I read it that like you make the bracha, and then right after the bracha, they get into the room because that's what the beis chatan is for.
Yeah,
So
I agree
what-
with you. You could have said like that, but I think that that's his point here. He's saying it's not that. It's mishum. It'd be just you need to say these bracha. You just need to say this bracha in order to have yichud.
So why would the Rambam and the Torah bring this specific case where they in the like where they are b'beit chatan? It could be anywhere else. Like the fact that they bring this specific case, for me at least, I understood it that it was
No,
like
that's a
right
totally
before,
different
right before
reason.
Yichud.
Beit Chatan, we're going to talk about this when we talk about, we're going to talk about this in Seif Yud. We're going to talk about this. In Seif Yud, he talks about what is a Beit Chatan. Beit Chatan means the wedding hall. I'll say it like that. The Beit Chatan is the wedding hall. You need to say these Sheva brachot in the wedding hall for a completely different reason. Because you're celebrating this magical event, you need to say the brachas where the event is taking place. You can't be saying the brachas somewhere else. That's all. Beit Chatanim is just the wedding hall. And you need to be saying the brachas there. You can't say the train station and then go to the Beit Chatanim. You need to be having it where the event is.
So hold a second. So even if you don't bring your kala back to your place, the fact that Beis Chatanim is the wedding hall is good enough to like enact nisuin?
No, wait. We've got lots of different shitot going on here. According to the Rambam, you're saying the bracha at the wedding hall. You're having the whole party, but the actual nisuin is only when you have yichud later. That's the way many Sfaradim do their weddings. Right? No, it's not, you don't think that's right?
No. I mean, I never.
Everybody, give me pushback. Tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah, but because like that's, I think you're like crossing boundaries of the machloket. That's gufo la machloket. The Rambam uses the language of Beit Chatan and not Beit Chatanim even, because like for him it's not a wedding hall, it's the actual house of the actual Chatan. Like his idyllic wedding is a wedding that everybody's waiting outside the Chatan's house. It's like a cheder yichud, but in reality, like we're going to their apartment and she's entering there and we're doing Sheva Brachot right outside. Like, I think like it goes really back to the shiur on Siman and Hey, that we're speaking that L'shitat Rambam, that's the only thing that actually is happening now. That's the only nisuin. When you go to the what the Ramah says about how they do.
Yeah, but even according to the Rambam, even according to what you're saying, and I did notice exactly the point you're saying, that he says Beit Chatan. But so still, you still have to have 10 people there in the house.
Outside.
Outside, when you're out in the yard in the winter, in the rain. I
don't know. They're in the house, but there's a room that they're entering that room. That's their conjugal like place.
There's 10 people there. You're having a suda. It's a big deal. You have people there, whether it's in his actual living room or in a wedding hall. I don't think it's relevant. Either way.
We were discussing like back in a couple of streams ago that like some people have some kind of a enclosed structure in the middle of the house, and that's what's called Beit Chatanim, right? It's like a specific place.
Yeah, we did discuss that, but I think we're now saying we're trying to envision the chuppah according to the Rambam. We're trying to envision a different chuppah where he just does it in his living room.
Oh yeah,
at the threshold,
in the living room. Yeah,
it's like before he carries her over the threshold, he gets the 10 men outside the door, and they say these brachos, and then they go in. And then where does everybody else go? They all wander off in different directions.
To me, the idea of other spaces
at
the name makes way more sense. Like, I don't know, like it felt like the way when Rambam is describing chuppah for him, it's kind of this like private thing, right? Again, it's like this idea, it's this act of like bringing the woman into the guy's home and then doing yichud and like them starting their life together. It didn't really seem like it was like and we have a little gathering outside and we say some brachas and we hold some wine and then you carry her over the threshold. Like,
but the Rambam says you need 10 men. And the Rambam says 10 men.
And Reb Nachum,
He
where do
says,
they go?
halacha hey. He says, Ein mevarchim birchat hatanim ela b'asara
That's what I'm
gedolim.
saying. It's like we agree that like you need the 10 for the Birkat Chatanim. I'm saying that doesn't really seem like the image that he presented of what the chuppah of like the going into the Chatan's house looks like.
Well, that's why I'm trying
So
to give
I agree with you, and I don't think it's like how.
I'm trying to give a modern interpretation of the Rambam, a modern way of understanding the Rambam, where we have still the 10 men, we have the bracha, and the yichud we have, and it can actually be sometime later. That's what I'm saying, because as long as it's kodem,
Right.
it satisfies that requirement, and therefore we could fulfill the Rambam's idea today without much change of what we're doing. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but
Well,
like
that would be contemporary Sfardim. But you asked the question before, Reb Nachum, where do these people go? I've been waiting for this one.
Yeah.
They go to eat the canopies.
Which there aren't any, right? That's
no,
a
but like
joke.
Reb Nachum, when we
Yes.
go when we stress it that far, like about the Rambam, we also spoke about this in the Shio on Siman Nun Hey. The Shitat Rambam, we can't actually say that he's obliged to do the bracha before because Kala B'lo Bracha Asur B'alo Kenido. The Rambam doesn't even recognize that there is such a Isser. Like this Isser, like I wouldn't say like that's the Inyan. That's how we do it ideally in the Rambam's mind. Like, and I would say that what the Bet Shmuel says, it's more of like why we do it like katchila by so, but not like that's the reason. You get what I mean?
So why would the Rambam mandate to do the bracha prior?
Because that's
at this point you could do whatever you want. Like if there is like really no significance to bracha aside from the fact that shvach boda, like don't mandate you do it before. Let them have yichud, let them do whatever they want, and then like do it at the wedding.
But that's how Chachamim do it. That's how Chachamim metaken it. Chachamim said to do the bracha before Nisuin, and where the only discussion is what is the act of Nisuin. The Ran says because the chuppah is not a yichud, so we don't need to do it like before he enters this imaginative canopy that doesn't actually does anything. And the Rambam says no, the actual act of Nisuin is entering this thing, so we need now to say the bracha before. But like it's more of like a question of how Chachamim metakened it than it's actually a question of the isur.
Isn't the Rambam for the Rambam like yichud b'bet chatan? Like that's always how I understood it.
Of course.
And the only reason why you need to do it prior is because kalabel bracha asura kenida.
I don't see it in the Rambam, and we actually said it in the Rav Nachum actually really expressed it in the Shio on Siman and Hey that we don't have this. The Rambam seems like to not even like to not know the sister in any way, or to say that kala b'lo bracha is actually kala b'lo chuppah.
Well, then you have the other explanation. Well, I'm just explaining the Beit Shmuel right here. I mean, I'm just explaining the Beit Shmuel. But you're right. We could have explained the Rambam as saying, no, it is over l'siatan. We saw there were commentaries that said that it is over l'siatan, and then we had to say that the mitzvah is purvu, and then it has to be right ahead before, and then you wouldn't be able to have a hefsek. But I'm just I'm agreeing with the Beit Shmuel. That's all.
But also, like, you can't say that about the Rambam, given his opinion about, like, again, like, we don't, with other mitzvot where we're dafka about Siatan, you wouldn't say, and then you did it, and then you said
do it 3 days later.
You did the bracha 5 days after you took the lulav, and actually you're fine. Like, that's not how that works.
Exactly. I agree with you, Alexi. I agree with you 100%. The Rambam says, remember, we said that 3 days later you can still say the bracha. So where's over l'siatan? Rather, you must say that it's just the brachot. It's better to say. I mean, you could a third possibility. The Rambam just says it's better to say it first, and really not because of kala b'lo bracha asura, and not because of over l'siatan, but just it's better to do it before. And therefore you can do it also after. So there's three, whatever. Yeah, there's difficulties.
But for me, it seems to make sense that the Rambam's view is Peru Urvu, right? Because he said that if the Nida, then you're not fully married, and then you have to like complete the Nisim later. So if the whole mitzvah is not
if it's a bracha of a mitzvah, then if you didn't, you could do the mitzvah without the bracha. The bracha is not necessary. So you don't need to do it, you see. You would be married. You wouldn't, and in fact, you would bracha levatal if you did it afterward.
But it's only in specific cases, if I remember the wrong correctly. Okay, I'll look at it over because
It's a complicated topic.
You've already done a thing.
We got to go forward. We got to go forward. Lexi, what do you want to say? Last point, Lexi.
No, I mean, whatever. It's not.
All right, so let's go on. Sarah, keep reading. We just said Baf Afal Gaf. Oh, wait a second. Let's just get our mind together again. He's saying that the bracha is a heter in order to have the yichud, and I suggested that could mean they could even be before by several hours.
Yeah, I guess I was wondering whether actually the Beit Shmuel is just trying to explain, like whether the Beit Shmuel's reading of the Rambam is that extreme, or whether he's when he cites this thing about as like it's just an explanation of the Rambam's general position. It's not meant to tell you like that's the inyan that we care about, as opposed to the other thing.
Maybe it's both.
Maybe it's both, or maybe it's I mean, just because of the next line, right? Afal gav disfirle brachot in makvin. Then you're like, but wait a minute, I just thought they were, right? that seems strange. So it seems like it's a more moderate reading, right? Because even the Beit Shmuel is going to acknowledge that the brachot are not like actually makvin. Mikol makom le'tchila bai she'al yachzor shum davar. Kemoshe kadav b'Seif hakodem.
Right. Remember, we said that kala below bracha really meant kala below chuppah. Right. And then the brachos are really not ma'akev. So then, but you still got to do them. So you do them. The brachot ein ma'akvin. You still got to do them. You got to do them. So
right. But I think that the point there is that like the Beit Shmuel isn't trying to tell you that the only thing that Rambam cares about is like the possibility that she's kala below bracha, because like that's he doesn't even think that's real, right? So then you, I guess then the question you got to ask yourself is like, why does the Beit Shmuel feel the need to tell you this the first half, right, that we just spent so much time on, right? But it seems like it's a kind of more moderate.
Well, we saw the same thing in the Beis Yosef just a half an hour ago. Nobody was surprised then, but we saw it. We saw it. It was brought by the Beis Yosef, brought it in the name of the Ramban or the Ran, and he said that the reason that he says do before is not because of Avei L'Siatan, but because of Kala. And we can say, well, wait, it's a good kasha, really. We're asking, and we're sort of answering it. Okay, it's a little bit problematic. Why? If really he doesn't need the brachos, then really it's just he doesn't have to bechuppah. So he says, Shelo yichaser klum shum davar. So it should be nice. All right, go ahead.
והראש דספירה לי דלא באין חופה, הראוי לביאה, ספירה לי דאין צריך לברך קודם הכניסה. וכך כתב בדרכי משה והטור דפוסק כראש.
So, right, in other words, once you say that there's no real yichud required to make a nisuin, then you could do the bracha. So what is the nisuin? The chuppah. So then we don't have to do it before the chuppah. We could do it after the chuppah or during the chuppah. Like Rashi said, kusha yikanes, as you're going in. Okay.
דפוסק כראש ופוסק דמברכים קודם החופה. ויש לומר, ברכות אין עיכוב לברך מברכים, אבל כשהיא נידה לדחות הנישואין עד שתטהר אין צריך. So maybe if she's nida and you think that these are not me'akvin, then like that would sort of change how you would do it. והר"ן כתב עוד טעם דמברכים קודם כדי שתהיה עובר לעשייתן.
Oh, so that's the other idea.
Right.
Go ahead.
So I guess he's really, right, the Beit Shmuel is really just kind of raising both. V'chein kaimalan. Okay, so maybe he's deciding. D'mevarchim b'erkat erusin kodem hakidushin kemo shekatav b'siman lamed daled.
Either way, for whatever reason we do it, we do it beforehand.
For whatever reason
that's important. It's important because we shouldn't always automatically trigger when they say over l'siatan, it means because there's a mitzvah. All brachas we do before whatever thing is going on.
Right.
That's how we do brachas. So even if the bracha is only l'shevach, you could say do the bracha in a normal way.
Good.
That's all. You're right. You're right.
And I think the Nida thing was trying to resolve, like, I think the Bach also talks about this, like a seeming kashya of the Torah. If we say that, like, the Rambam's reasoning is that, like, it's usher, like, you can't have a, like, chupash in a realibia and, like, kala b'lo bracha asura, right? Then the Torah is a problem because he says the bracha has to be before chuppah, but the Torah seems to hold, like, the Rosh, who says chuppah ha'inu realibia is fine. Right. And so they were like, how can he both hold that it has to be before the chuppah if this is the reason, but also say that a chuppah ha'inu realibia is fine? And at least the Bach's answer was like, okay, he holds that, like, when it's a nida that's like in a realibia, like, you don't have to, like, push off your wedding because she's in a realibia. But in a case where you can do this very simple thing of making the bracha in advance and make it a chuppah ha'realibia, like, if you can, then you can do this very simple thing and still have your wedding at the same time, you should. Like, you may as well.
Right. No, right. Well, it doesn't really have to be Ruya the Bia, but if it could be by saying the brachas, so then say them. Good. Nice. Thank you, Lexi.
Good.
Okay, go on, Sarah. So where were we? Umasha anu mivarchim. We're there. We're
מה שאנו מברכים ברכת נישואין תחת החופה, משום דחופה ליקה ייחוד.
Wait. So first of all, he said, we want to do it beforehand. And then he says, but actually, we do it under the chuppah. So how come we don't do it before you step into the chuppah? Which is our question that's sort of been bothering us for a long time. I think that's what he's going to ask. I think that's what he's asking. So,
yeah.
So Mishum.
And the answer is because chuppah isn't yichud, so there's no isur on doing it under the chuppah. So, like, why not?
So what is it over l'asiyatan? So what is it before? Read the next line.
V'have over la'asiya kodem she'ochlim biyachad b'makom tzanua.
Oh,
right?
So remember we saw this explanation of chuppah as being, and by the way, this is the Aruch HaShulchan seems to go with this one too, as the main one. That the main thing of yichud is that they're eating together b'makom sanua. And I said, and I remember I said that it doesn't mean only the two of them, but a semi-private area. They should be eating, and they should be eating together. So it's like, in wedding halls in Jerusalem, I don't know, maybe up until recently, or maybe even still, they would give you food in the Cheder Yichud. There'd always be food in the Cheder Yichud. Now, because maybe you're fasting, but there'd always be food there. And so it's like there's a special Indian of eating together. And I think it's very beautiful because I think that's one of the things that a couple does, is they eat together. That's a sign of marriage, that you eat together. And it doesn't have to, but the photographer won't ruin it either, because it doesn't have to be mamish yachad. All right, Rabbi Lenz.
No. It fits into the narrative that we talked about in terms of the brachas. That shows the hatzlacha of the couple. It's erratic when they eat together, and that although the food at the Jerusalem wedding place is not too erratic, but who knows? Burnt cholent and well done kugel may be erratic in some situations. Yeah, I think this is quite important. But I would say something here. It's really hard. This is terrific. All this is terrific because the question is, or for me at least, what's the gorein of what causes the wedding to take place? I mean, the marriage to take place, or what's a raya that the marriage has taken place?
Right.
And you don't have to answer it. It's like
it's both.
This is how we're showing it. As you said, this is what married people do. Married people could do.
But I just want to. Go ahead.
But you can eat. You can eat within Nida. You're allowed to eat with it. It doesn't affect anything. You still, according to the Rambam, you still have a major problem there because you haven't affected anything. Eating doesn't solidify it. And the rich position is that
I'm sorry. I have to tell you.
Nachum.
I'm sorry. I have to tell you that the Beit Shmuel is a Ashkenazi. What do I want? What do you want?
I don't think. I think this is objected. I think that the Rambam is ne'eman to the Gemara on this one, and that's why I have a problem with it. I don't see it as Ashkenazi and Sephardi. I just see it as where's the thing derived from? How ne'eman is it to the?
Well, we talked about a lot. There's a Tosfot that talks about it, about arguing on the Gemara, explaining that the Gemara doesn't have to be mamash yichud. Look at the Tosfot. But I just want to say one more thing before we go on, is that I would even say, you say, well, wait a second, at my wedding we didn't have a cheder yichud, or we didn't eat in the cheder yichud. I would even push that the makom tzanua could even be a table in the wedding hall. That you have a table with the chatan and the kala are there, and they're eating together next to each other. That's also in the category, in the general idea of eating b'makom tzanua, even if it's in the middle of the hall. But you're together.
Those are very loose structure for tzanua, though.
Yes, I agree with you. But tzanua doesn't necessarily mean private. It can also mean like you're together.
We saw it in.
Oh, sorry, Lexi.
No, just we the section. Go.
It means the couple are tzanua. The 18,000 Belzers do not necessarily have to be tzanua.
I feel like it's described in the chuppah section as being like a discrete area, right? Like not makom tzanua is so private, as in like a set off. Like when they were talking about like the klundasot and the things like that too, they were like, yeah, they're in a area that's clearly like theirs. That's like
demarcated, a demarcated area. Yeah, I think that's we can read it like that. I mean, whatever. You don't have to take. This is just an idea. You don't have to. I'm not guaranteeing that that's the right thing. But if I want to fit in a modern behavior, I can say, well, that's also called the makom tzanua, because we definitely saw that it doesn't have to be private. Okay, we go on. Dim lokein. So he says, so we're still getting over l'asiyatan because we're doing it before the eating of the together. So sorry. So b'makom tzanua
umizeh gam ken raya di'ikar chuppah hu achila b'makom tzanua di'im lo ken.
That is the ikar, like the Aruch HaShulchan said. That is the ikar, the eating. Jews like to eat. Like also most human beings like to eat. But proof that Jewish people are human beings. Okay.
Okay, קשה על המנהג שלנו. איך עושים שני דברים הסותרים זה על זה.
Well, he's going to explain.
קודם הקדושין כדי שיהיה עובר לעשייה. וברכת נישואין מברכים תחת החופה.
Wait,
let's get the kasha first, right? The problem, so he's going to say, this doesn't make a lot of sense because it seems like we're doing two sort of opposite things. On the one hand, we're saying the brachot, we're saying
before kiddushin.
Before kiddushin.
He's talking about birkat kiddushin.
We're saying birkat erusin before you do the kiddushin, dafka for the purpose of it being over l'asiyatan, right? And then we're turning around and like very shortly after that saying birkat nisuin under the chuppah, not over l'asiyatan. So that seems strange.
Although he just answered that. He did answer that it is over the siyatan because it's the chuppah is really the later part. So I don't see the question so much. But yeah, that is the question. So go on. That's the question, however good it is.
Right, is that like I'm not it's basically the same question we had, but we've already answered it.
Yeah, exactly. I think we already answered it. But yeah,
okay. Miu yesh lomar.
Birkat Erusin.
Sorry. Birkat Erusin shani dimachir ha'erusin bebracha. Lachen tzarich lomar over l'asiya ma she'en ken bebirkat nisuin k'moshe katav b'sof Seif tet. Uva darkei Moshe katav.
Wait. So explain that answer, or you can ask me to explain.
So I think the idea is that there's something different about birkat erusin that has to be over la'asiya.
Why? Mishum shani mid dakir erusin. It mentions erusin bebracha.
Right, because
bracha,
the bracha itself is obviously about that in a way that like Sheva brachot are just like kind of nice, like
right.
Birkot Shevach. They're not like specifically about the thing.
Right. They're just about like Adam
right.
and
I mean, I think
Eve.
this gets to, right. It gets to Lexi's point that like there's something bizarre about like saying the bracha on taking lulav like 3 days later. And that feels like it is a problem about like over last time. But like these other brachot, I don't know, like they sort of extend in time.
Yeah, you know, it's we saw opinions, if you remember, when we learned about Birkas Irusin, we saw opinions that it's also kind of a shevach, possibly. But it seems to be a quasi shevach and a quasi you know, here he doesn't say that it is a birkat mitzvah. He just says it mentions the nisuin, it mentions the erusin, so we want to do it before. Whereas this one doesn't really mention.
Yeah, whereas this one doesn't. Yeah, I mean, I guess I just read that as his way of saying like one of these is like a bracha on a mitzvah and one of these is not, and so the one that's a bracha on a mitzvah needs to be over l'asiyah of the mitzvah, just like all the other. Birkot.
Right, but remember there was a machlokas on Birkas Irusin if it is a bracha on a mitzvah or not. And I think you're right that the Shulchan Aruch, or at least I think the Shulchan Aruch paskins that it is a bracha.
I think the Beis Shmuel is just like taking sides on that question.
Yeah, exactly. The Shulchan Aruch paskins that brachas Irusin is a birkas mitzvah and therefore it should be before. That was, we saw that in Lamed Dalet, in Siman Lamed Dalet.
Right, so I think then he's just using that in order to.
Yes.
I mean, I guess he could have, instead of saying what he says here, he could say like because it is a birkat mitzvah, but
right.
Whatever.
He didn't actually use those language yet. All right, go ahead. Ubedarkei Moshe katav.
Ubedarkei Moshe katav l'didan osin chupat nida ein tzarich lahakdim habrachot lachupa. So
this is what we saw in the Darkei Moshe.
Yeah.
And then I think you didn't see it, but the explanation is, well, go ahead. What's the explanation?
Right. So the explanation is that if because like we in Ashkenaz do chupat nida, then in that, because of that, it must be that it's not a bracha on the mitzvah of Priya Revia, because otherwise how would we allow chupat nida? And therefore it can't be that we need to say the bracha beforehand.
Exactly. Perfect. Exactly. That's a very interesting point. So in other words, we're saying, there's all kinds of ideas in the Rishonim going around, but when it comes to the psak, we're paskening that the bracha of Erusin is a birkat mitzvah, and the bracha of the Sheva brachos are brachos Sheva. And therefore they have a different din as far as over l'siyatan.
There's something else, I forget who, but somebody also brings up that like we say the Sheva bracho for 7 days, right? Like how could it be over l'siyatan? How could it be like bracha or making up some discrete mitzvah when we say it 7 times? Like you're not getting married separately 7 times. Like it's like another very good support for the idea that it's like you're celebrating the ongoing fact of like this marriage, but it's not like a bracha on a discrete action.
Totally agree.
But by the way, this is where we began. This is where we began this evening. The difference between the discourse of Erusin, which is a Kenyan, we don't care about happiness, we don't care about anything else, feelings, and the public is not involved, and the discussion on this discourse, which is a discourse of transformation, happiness, a transformation that takes place almost without us seeing it. Yeah, it's very good.
Yeah.
It does take a lot of days, and there is a very late Achron who wanted to say that with each Sheva brachot is some sort of kiyum of it's still a mitzvah, somehow some kiyum of the mitzvah. You have that one after another during the Sheva brachot. And I told you that from Rabbi Chaim, that the author of that Chiddush asked Reb Chaim, told it to Reb Chaim, who wasn't so sure about it. He says, well, I'm not so sure, but Mazel Tov, because keep on getting married.
Can you argue that Panim Chadashot were just another opportunity to get more Edim to witness the fact that this couple is married, just in case there was a problem with the first Edim?
No,
But you only need
I wouldn't
one.
go there.
You only need one new person.
First
That's
of all, you need
what-
one new person. Yeah, the
Third
Aruch
involved
Shulchan has a
too.
nice explanation of why you need Panim Chadashot, but we'll leave that for other shiurim. We did very well, Seif Aleph. But we didn't. We have some more Seifim to do.
Our goal was was different. We'll go back and we will go north of Kiev and reconnoiter and figure out what the next plan should be.
I think I want to continue. Well, we'll discuss it. But I think we'll continue. This is important, very important.
We'll continue
Siman.
next
Very
week.
important, Siman. It's worth spending
Yeah.
some time on it.
We'll spend the time. I agree. Before Pesach, I make an effort to speak to every Talmud. And so if you know, in general, for the next week, some open times that you have, it's a matter of touching base. I would let me know, and then we'll figure it out. Do it on Zoom probably. Okay.